Hi, everybody. I want to ask you a question, and actually a series of what's going to turn out to be rhetorical questions. How many people recognize this device? Not the image on the device, but the device itself. So we're not dating anyone here. It's okay. It's a judgment-free zone. But this device is one of the first BlackBerrys from the 90s that was used widely throughout the industry and by us in our personal lives for communication purposes. And at the same point in time, can you imagine trying to use this device today, to function today, to do the things that you do now on your mobile device and in your personal lives? That's the rhetorical question. You really can't. You simply wouldn't be able to function with that today. So I ask another rhetorical question. Why are we looking at infrastructure funding, financial planning, using spreadsheet tools from the 90s today? We're so quick to adopt new technology, to rush to the store to buy the latest and greatest iPhone, 14's out apparently today, or was recently, in our personal lives, and we're doing this in a way that we're trying to make our lives better. We're trying to make things easier for ourselves, to make better decisions, to enhance the quality of our life. The time is now to apply that mindset in our financial planning and infrastructure services, to apply technology to achieve those same types of outcomes. So past conditions were more stable, and I think it enabled us as communities and those that are involved in infrastructure finance and funding to do things a little bit perhaps less than optimal. So we were in situations where financial planning and forecasting were activities that we do once a year, maybe twice a year at budget time, maybe during the mid-year for budget amendments. And so because of that process and the infrequent nature of that process, we would find ourselves just going along with tools that we had that were maybe provided to us by consultants or developed by someone that's left the organization and just been handed over to others. And over time, we needed to add things to it so we could incorporate additional new information or maybe model some new scenarios. But we really didn't need to do formal training, and we really didn't need to think about how easy it is to integrate data into that process because we only did it once a year. Well, today, it's different. So we've all seen massive changes, significant changes in our environments around us today, associated with things such as revenue streams from business tax and sales use tax, and we have movement restrictions from lockdown periods from COVID, or subsequent supply chain issues that manifest themselves in rampant inflation that have caused increases in operating costs as well as infrastructure costs. And then now to curb those pressures, we're seeing rising interest rates, rising at very unprecedented levels. All of this rampant change really requires decision makers to have real-time access to a tool that can enable them to analyze different infrastructure decisions in response to changing conditions with their most current available data. And so the past is a bit problematic today. When we look at developing Microsoft Excel or other types of spreadsheet tools to do financial planning, they start off typically with a singular purpose. But then over time, my development team loves to refer to these as spaghetti models because you start adding things to them. And they weren't necessarily designed to do those things, but you've adapted them and added them into it. And so it was once a clean and simplistic approach. It's now become very complicated and messy. And it's very challenging to use. It's very error prone. It introduces a significant amount of risk. And one of the important consequences of this is it takes time. It takes time to unpack these things. It takes time to unpack the errors and to make these things usable. And you're also looking at these things in an environment where you have a very limited time frame to make decisions and evaluate scenarios in response to these changing conditions. And so all these things are culminating in us looking at a challenge on our time. So if you were to ask me, I would say time is our most important non-renewable resource, and we're literally using it faster than ever. It's the most precious thing, I think, as we all look at our schedules to us now, similar to what maybe toilet paper was at the beginning of the pandemic. Yes, I went there. It's that important to us today in all aspects of what we do in our day-to-day lives, but think about the criticality of that in the amount of time we can actually dedicate to infrastructure planning and funding and decision-making. So at Stantec, we've developed FAMS, our financial analysis and management system. And this system provides a lot of solutions to those problems associated with using those tools from the 90s. And this solution is cloud-based. It allows for simultaneous access, integration, and efficient data uploading into the platform so you can control and manage different versions of data, but also create and compare scenarios and share them in real time. And it has capital funding optimization features that allow you to look at different levels of capital spending, different assumptions of revenue streams to be able to optimize your capital funding program to maximize what you can do from an infrastructure investment standpoint and minimize the cost to the users of those services. So how does this work? So FAMS fundamentally starts with the process of integrating data. We've all been talking about and hearing about data through the discussions today. The platform is designed in a way to make this process repeatable and easy and scalable for all communities and all different services that they may provide. Once that data is integrated We then have the ability to create seamlessly ranges of assumptions, save those variables, and make combinations of those variables into assumptions that we can then compare the results of those scenarios side by side in real time. All of this is something that can happen in the matter of just mere minutes, as opposed to some things that used to take hours or weeks, depending upon availability of that one person that used to know how to run that model that's been kicking around for 20 years. So this is great from an efficiency standpoint, but this comes down to real-world importance in significant decisions. And there's a community in Minnesota that is one of several hundred in the United States that's dealing with and wrestling with the consequences of closure of significant economic engines in their communities, decommissioning of coal plants. There's a beautiful coal plant on the St. Croix River in Minnesota that's being decommissioned in a few years. But that coal plant represents almost 50% of the taxable value in that community. So on a prior slide, you saw a kind of a device that a community had been using to actually manage and mitigate the risk in spreadsheets. If Oak Park Heights had one of these models with Danger Bear in it, Danger Bear would be sounding every possible alarm because of the impacts to their revenue stream. And what that did to their resources, it literally depleted the resources within about a year of the decommissioning of that coal plant. So this is where Stantec really leveraged the best of what we have to offer. Great consultative services, working with stakeholders, creating an advisory panel to identify and develop all the possible site redevelopment options for what that site could be in the future. And we brought that together with FAMS to be able to analyze what was the status quo before the plant would be closed, but then what happens when we look at these different types of land uses and the net impacts to revenues, to expenses, and even state contributions or supplemental resources, to be able to help the community understand the impacts of the different land use options with a true understanding of their financial consequences so they can maintain their quality of life in the community that they love. It's also an opportunity to tie things together. So in addition to enhancing decision-making and being a great tool and resource to make very important and impactful decisions, it's also a way to tie together great things that communities are doing. Whether it's operating budget forecasting and monitoring those throughout the year, doing demand forecasting, looking at growth in their community, there's an opportunity to bring those things together in the FAMS environment. And in fact, communities like Olathe, Kansas are doing just that. It enables quick decision-making in a matter of days that used to take weeks for them to bring these tools together within their organization. And that's powerful. And it's powerful because of savings that it achieves. If you think about a community that does financial planning and looks at just one system and takes time to populate the models that they're using, perform quality control, update the data, review results, share those results, it's about 150 hours. And if you were to have a consulting firm do that, like Stantec, that would be, or on others, that would be $25,000 a year in either personnel cost or consulting cost to do those activities. And that's just for one application. Communities have multiple services and need to do financial planning and infrastructure funding for all those services. So this compounds very quickly when you think about applying this throughout an entire organization in all aspects of the community services that they provide. And that's important. That's a very important value proposition of what FAMS can do from a true resource conservation standpoint. But it's so much more than that. With FAMS, you have the ability to integrate additional information to really enhance your understanding of the consequences of decisions that you have in front of you and to be able to make better decisions based upon that understanding. Whether it's understanding affordability for different capital spending scenarios, the fiscal impacts of different land use that I mentioned, what happens in different growth scenarios or changes in your revenue drivers, what happens if we change our level of service, and what does that do to our costs but also our risks? What happens in a scenario where we want to look at different types of funding sources for our capital program, grants, loan combinations, bonds? All these things can be easily integrated into FAMS to make even more informed decisions. And I think the outcomes from that are even more important than the monetary savings because you're making better decisions from that. And so many communities today are looking to make better decisions around equity. And this is a great opportunity to tie that into that discussion process and that decision making. An example here is using FAMS with readily available data about utility billing information and census data so that you can understand how bills are throughout the community, what that water usage is that drives that, and what does that relate to in terms of incomes. What is the ability of people to pay these utility bills, and how does that change over time as we change our capital improvement requirements and have to pay for those with rate increases or other funding sources? So you're able to make decisions about how to pay for your infrastructure with an understanding of that affordability and the distribution throughout the community. And that's very important, and it's powerful because now with that understanding, you can actually get in front of issues and say, well, look, Is this really a function of income or is it water use? Let's go talk to these areas about our conservation programs and make them aware of those. Maybe they can control and manage their bills that way. Or maybe let's go talk to them about our customer assistance programs that are available to help support them in paying their utility bills. All of this goes to minimizing impacts from necessary funding increases to support our infrastructure. This is very important to me. And so I'm very passionate about this, and I think this is just an opportunity for us as a company, and I hope for all those communities that are listening, you see the opportunity to make better decisions with the technology that's out there today, because I challenge you to find a way to do that with spreadsheets. So all of this is a takeaway to please, please advise your clients as communities, take this as an opportunity to really assess the use of new technologies in today's environment to make better decisions, to keep pace with changing conditions. It's really essential. And I think if you take a look at our website, you'll get a better sense and an understanding of how 21st century technology can really improve a community's ability to make decisions in planning, in response to changing conditions, and what we see today, which is an ever-changing environment. So with that, I'd like to thank you for listening, and I'm happy to entertain any discussion.